Writing yourself into a corner is never advisable. Every great narrative comes with acts and arcs that promote a particular theme, but sometimes you find that you've gotten so far without a conclusion that makes sense within the time frame. What's the solution to this? I'll let you know next week. For me, one of the most memorable endings from any video game can be found in the final moments of Halo 2. It's not a particularly spectacular ending, but that's why it's so memorable to me. The last stages of the game build up to some sort of climactic conclusion, but then you've got Master Chief talking about finishing the fight and then roll credits? Find out in the next game 3 years from now. That is ballsy. Cliffhangers in general are super ballsy. Halo 2 is lucky that it's the midpoint of a trilogy backed by a company as big as Microsoft. Not every game is so lucky. I'm not sure how I feel about cliffhangers really. It's an effective way of drumming up interest in a future release, but it comes at the cost of abandoning the idea of a standalone story that can exist on its own. Alternatively, you can leave the conclusion hanging and make a game that effectively has an incomplete story. You know when you play a game that has missing textures or weird facial animations? Unresolved cliffhangers are like that, but with story. Could have finished it, decided against it. All I want is some goddamn closure. With cliffhangers being these pivot points designed to drive interest for the continuation of the story in a new installment through withholding information, it's maybe quite a good idea for the story in question to have a strong narrative. It might go without saying at this point, but for a cliffhanger to work, I kind of have to care about the resolution, otherwise everyone is wasting their time and we could be putting more effort towards concluding the game properly. I'm still working out if cliffhangers are a good idea or not. Games like Xenoblade Chronicles X make me feel like they aren't. It's a tale as old as time itself. Humans flee Earth because some aliens are being dicks, at which point they crash land on some new alien planet and they try to rebuild society. They're trying to look for some important thing because everyone's actually robots and the aliens don't like that. After a while, a story like this, it begins to write itself. There'll come a day when I get a chance to say nice things about Xenoblade Chronicles X, but for now it's got like 50 billion things wrong with it despite being a pretty good game. I've said before that I dislike the story because I feel like it lacks focus, but to its credit, it does try to close everything off with some kind of big finale. You're in the right place with all the right characters doing all the right things, including the first real interaction between protagonist and villain, but what are you gonna do? Eventually the humans secure the important life-giving bit of machinery at the cost of some guy called Lau becoming the final boss somehow and biting the dust because of that. Then in the epilogue they do a bit of investigating and realize that everything's broken. The super significant lump of technology that keeps all of the humans alive on this hostile planet hasn't been working for a long time. Also, remember that Lau guy? Yeah, he's respawned on a beach now. This planet is pretty wacky, you know. Is the game going to explain why? Nah, it's way more fun being mysterious about it. Honestly, the first time I saw this ending, I thought that I needed something else to unlock some kind of satisfying conclusion, but no, it doesn't exist. It won't even get some kind of closure in the next game because Xenoblade Chronicles 2 won't have anything to do with X. I don't know, I kind of lost focus when the robots turned up. When do we start really feeling it? The most interesting endings are one that no one can agree on the quality of. Like Metal Gear Solid 3, amazing. Mass Effect 3, mostly terrible. Bioshock Infinite, no fucking idea, I can't remember what any of this means. But in the endless space of interwebs with enough forums to sink a battleship, you get entire threads arguing over the merits of certain video game endings. Prototype 2 has one such ending where you've got the protagonist of the second game going up against the protagonist of the first game in a no-holds-barred epic confrontation of shape-shifting bioweapon people. James Heller from Prototype 2 is trying to rescue his daughter from a corrupted Alex Mercer from the first game, and with enough shit-talking he gets the job done, consuming Mercer in the process and wiping out the infected in the general area. And that's kind of it. You know you're keeping things ambiguous when the characters literally ask, what do we do now? In a way, it's actually quite a good way of making a cliffhanger. This way you're keeping the game open for a sequel while still having the sort of ending that kind of works on its own. Like, you remember how The Last of Us sort of just ends? A little bit like that. The difference here is that Prototype 2 doesn't quite have the same narrative draw as The Last of Us, and really it's a bit of a shit show story-wise. With the final line being, what do we do now, it's a little too fitting that Activision haven't touched the franchise in 5 years now, with no immediate plans to give a more conclusive end to the saga. Maybe not such a bad ending in the immediate scheme of things, but didn't do a lot for the series as a whole. What do we do now? Fuck if I know, people are paid more money than I am to answer a question like that. Even if there are loose threads that don't really relate back to the first game all that well, Prototype 2 didn't really carve out a market for itself, and Developer Radical had to lay off a whole load of staff and have a more supporting role with Activision's other projects. I was always under the impression that it was a fairly popular franchise, but apparently not enough. If you've only got into video games in the last decade or so, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Ubisoft only make games about some guy roaming around an open world environment, climbing towers that help fill in a map, and stealthily killing any enemies they come across. To be fair, even if Ubisoft have slipped into a holding pattern, there's still quite a few differences between, say, Far Cry Primal and Watch Dogs 2. And they're only doing this because people keep buying them, people gotta feed their families, you know? But there's still some kind of following behind a game like 13, a cel-shaded first-person shooter that really thrives off of visuals that haven't aged a day in 14 years. It's really worth playing because the comic book style that runs throughout the game has never really been replicated since, but that didn't help its sales. In fact, they were so bad that every future game in the series was cancelled. It's just as well that 13 ends off in a wholly satisfying ending that wraps everything up in a nice little, no, this didn't happen. 13 is your usual tale of assassinations and conspiracies headed by a protagonist with amnesia who has to fill in the blanks as he goes. Turns out that main character Jason Fly is taking the guise of someone who murdered the President of the United States, with the original assassin having been betrayed by a group of conspirators who all have numbers going up to 20. Jason Fly kicks the crap out of a large portion of this group and you're presented with a party on a ship to celebrate. Then as you try to find the dead president's brother on this ship, you overhear him imply that he's the head of the group of conspirators. Effectively, the brother had the president killed so he could be the president, I think. Hey, it's fine, this story is set to be continued in the next game, whenever that happens. I can't wait for the next Assassin's Creed game. That story always has me on the edge of my seat. Ending your game on a cliffhanger requires an untold amount of confidence. You do so in the knowledge that you've got a great chance of resolving it in the next game, but that only works if there is a next game. Sometimes this just isn't possible. But if we're dealing with a game that was there, but was then cancelled, it's not good. It saddens me that we still live in a world where Capcom doesn't care about Mega Man. I mean, they were never my favourite games, but I find it a bit weird that one of Capcom's most iconic franchises has been neglected for so long. Well, technically they made a mobile game a few years ago, but it was an endless runner that never made it out of South Korea. And technically they're making a new Mega Man game, but they used promo art that looked like low quality fan art, so that's not encouraging either. And technically we got Mighty No. 9 last year from the mind of Mega Man's creator. As a good show, it's really funny, doesn't it at all? And technically none of them are Mega Man Legends 3, so everything in life is pointless and we'll all live meaningless lives. Missing out on a sequel to a reasonably popular spin-off series would bum quite a few people out, but when you factor in that Mega Man Legends 2 ended on a cliffhanger, it makes everything worse. I'll skip over a lot of this game's plot because all you need to know is that Mega Man is stranded on a distant planet after his friend Gats, who can merge with the rocket that got them there in the first place, is killed. It's fine though, since a bunch of good guys are working on building a rocket and it's quirky and silly because you've got goofy music playing in the background, but that is it. Not to mention that there's this small note about dangerous machines being activated on Earth, and do you know where the only people who can do a damn thing about it are? Yeah, they're on some distant planet with no way off of it. Don't worry, this game came out years ago. You can guarantee that the writers have forgotten how they were going to resolve this. Come on Capcom, you fixed Resident Evil this year. We know you've got it in you somewhere. With cliffhangers being this huge unnecessary risk to take for video game writers, you don't see them applied to your average video game. Really, the only time you can make an excuse for it would be when you know you'll be able to make more games in the series, hence why big budget trilogies can basically do whatever the hell they want. But even in comfortable circumstances like that, no one ever stacks cliffhangers on top of each other with each successive game. How does Half-Life 1 end? With a mild cliffhanger. What about Half-Life 2? Yeah, pretty significant cliffhanger here too. Half-Life Episode 1? More of the same. I'm sure Valve wouldn't end off Episode 2 with a bigger cliffhanger, not sure that's physically possible. You don't know shit. Half-Life 2 has always been praised for the pace of its narrative, but it catches a light in episode 2 where everything's exploding, people are launching rockets, G-Man's being weird again. I think there was even a nod to Aperture Science from Portal in there and how it all links together. It's an episode that exists almost solely to bring plot points together for one final conclusive third episode. The end of the game is kind of meandering towards the end, but then Alex Vance's father Eli is killed by these robots, and no word of a lie, the final moments of the Half-Life franchise to date is Alex sobbing over her dad's dead body. Oh yeah, no, this is fine. What number comes after 2 again? At this stage, I don't really think I have to mention the significance of a cliffhanger that tried to set up Half-Life Episode 3 or Half-Life 3 or whatever the hell was supposed to come next. It's amazing how keen Valve were in the mid to late 2000s of releasing these episodic adventures, but through one reason or another, we don't know why, getting information out of Valve is like getting an intelligent sentence out of Donald Trump. All of the enthusiasm surrounding the franchise died so quickly. And with writers and animators for previous Half-Life games retiring and leaving the company, we're about as far away from a new game as we've ever been. The last bit of dialogue in Half-Life 2 Episode 2 is, "No, don't leave me." It's just a little too poignant. This is RabbidLuigi, and I still stand by the fact that Half-Life 3 is effectively an emergency plan for Valve if they ever start running out of money. The problem with that is that Steam has become this monopolizing marketplace oversaturated with mediocre video games and bad practices, and Valve are making bank off of that. As long as people keep buying and freaking out over new weapon skins for Team Fortress 2 and Counter-Strike, they have no need to make that game. You're part of the problem. Have you got an idea that you'd like me to turn into a countdown? Let me know in a comment down below, and make sure you check out my Twitter, where I'll be turning the best submissions into a poll where you can then decide the best topic. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.